Scott Grayson from New Orleans yesterday, and his Grayson's grades are up at 97.3 ESPN.com. He joins us now on the Boardwalk Honda hotline, and I would imagine it was a very interesting scene, Scott, in that locker room. We saw video of, Brandon Graham in tears, and it looked like Foles was very emotional. So overall, did it feel like the finality of this 2-year, special, the Super Bowl run, and then this? Did it feel like that they knew that this is really going to be different moving forward?
Yeah, I think they understand the winds of change are going to be blowing through that locker room in kind of a big way. I mean, you got guys talking about whether or not they're going to retire. You got other guys, unsure of what their future holds, whether it'll be here in Philadelphia, somewhere else. I think it's going to be a completely different locker room. And, guys like Malcolm Jenkins were talking about that and how much, the business of the sport now takes over, and it really does affect things. And you hate to see, some of the guys you had a locker next to, move on or go somewhere else. And, of course, everybody knows that the character of the team is going to change in some way a little bit by – you got to believe that you don't carry Foles and Wentz through next season together as well. So, there's a lot of big questions facing this team, and I think it's going to be an interesting moment here, a fork in the road as to how this organization handles it to decide whether they continue going down the path they've been on or perhaps maybe they make some bad choices here, and which could certainly happen, and then it kind of jeopardizes what they've built, the momentum they've built up. But these guys feel like they'll be back. The ones that are here feel like this team will be back in the playoffs and have a chance to make some more noise next year.
Well, I guess a lot of that is because Carson Wentz is back. I said throughout the show so far today before you've come on, Scott, it's okay to say I like Nick Foles, but he did not play very well yesterday.
No, and what really stood out to me was watching him throw the ball. He put a lot of air under some of those passes,
yes,
more so than I remember him doing in Chicago. And that's the biggest difference between Foles and Wentz that I see when you look at them. I mean, Wentz, that ball comes out of his hands and it moves. I mean, he can get it going, and he throws it a lot harder than Nick Foles does. Now, Foles' passes, by being that way, are probably a little easier to catch. But, Wentz is an NFL quarterback, and I think that's the guy, in my mind, you put your future in.
Scott, you move forward here. Obviously, it looks like the end for Foles, but do you see a scenario where he could be back?
I saw more of a scenario of him being back a year ago. I really don't think so. I think that there is a little something to, you don't want Carson looking over his shoulder at the guy who's got a statue outside the front of the Link right now, who was a Super Bowl MVP. I think there's something to that, and I think you have to try to take advantage of getting what you can get for Nick Foles. There's definitely something, that you should be able to get for him. Now, the asking price, and it's going to be tempting for the Eagles, and they very well may ask, what will you give us for Carson? If you could get 3 first-round picks for that guy, it's tempting to turn that down, but I think it's so hard to find a franchise quarterback in this league that you really need to take advantage of having one and not have to go look for another.
Yeah, I mean, I thought you saw yesterday some of the limitations that Nick brings to the table, but it's not 100% on Nick. I do want to get your thoughts on when you thought the game kind of shifted, because Philadelphia has the 14-0 momentum. They have the ball. There's a lot of options here. You got the interception. You got the fake punt. You got that long drive. You got the Brandon Graham, sack when he's unable to land on that ball. A lot of people have theories. When did you were in that building, and I saw you tweet how loud it was in there. When did you think, this feels a little odd?
At first, I thought it was the interception that they got off of Ertz. But after further reflection and seeing the way that the game played out, I really believe that the game changed when Brandon Brooks went out. I think that he meant so much to that line, and talking to Lane Johnson after the game as well. There's so much when you're going on a silent count in timing, communication, and knowing what the guy next to you is going to do without having to say anything, that I think, it's not a knock on Wisniewski, but Johnson and Wisniewski never, really didn't practice, much of that. And I think when Brooks went out, it interrupted or disrupted so much of what the offensive line was doing. Because in that first quarter, I thought the line was opening up great holes. They were giving Nick good windows to throw the ball through, and that wasn't there the last 3 quarters of the game.
Yeah, I want to get your take on Jim Schwartz. He's getting, there's this group of people who just don't like Schwartz, and If I told you, Scott, hey, you're flying down to New Orleans and the Saints are only going to score 20, that's a win, right?
Yeah, that's what I thought. I mean, as I was sitting there doing the grades after the game, I made a conscious decision in my mind that when you're up 14-0, both the offense and defense had enough mistakes that nobody deserved an A. And Crevan LeBlanc might have been the one closest to getting it. But Jim Schwartz, in my mind, to have that defense hold the Saints to 20 points, you're right. If you told me before I went down there, said, hey, not sure the Eagles are going to score, but if you hold the Saints to 20 points, I'm thinking the Eagles win that game. And they just didn't get it done offensively. I thought, you can't really blame the defense. The offense was sputtering so much. You can blame the defense in the sense, as I wrote in the grades, that they just didn't get off the field on third down. They gave up way too many third down conversions. Some of those third and really long, too, and those were backbreakers. But, look, I like Jim Schwartz. I like the way he approached the game. I like the way he called the game yesterday, and I think he had those guys ready to play. I don't see why he should be getting a lot of criticism too much. Sure, some, but not a ton.
Yeah, I mean, he's not absolved that he had a perfect game yesterday, but to give up 20, I think a lot of people are just looking at that one drive, the third down and 16, and that, at the end of the day, look, they had a nice drive. It happens in games. I mean, to suggest that team, one of the top scoring teams in the league, only gets 20 in its own building, and the Eagles' defense is getting questioned, I find it to be tough. When there was a lot of issues, you mentioned Foles. I thought he underthrew a bunch of guys. I thought he missed some guys. I just thought he was off of his game. But the Brandon Brooks thing, I really thought that was a big play. But how about Fletcher Cox and losing him? It seemed that was a part of that long drive.
Yeah, I think it's very similar. What Brooks' absence did for the to the offense, I think Fletcher Cox's absence happened, and it all happened roughly at the same time. So the Saints suddenly had a little bit easier time moving the ball when Fletcher Cox wasn't in there. He was really creating some havoc right in front of Breeze because, of course, he's coming right up the middle. And Breeze is seeing that. And he's well aware of knowing that Fletcher Cox is going to probably be the first guy to start disrupting stuff for his offense. And I thought that when Cox went out, and you got to credit these guys who really played through a lot of
Do we know what was wrong with Fletcher?
I forget what they said. I think it was an ankle, and he kept going in and out of the locker room when they would, when the defense would come off the field. I don't know if it was to get more tape done or to get something done with his ankle, but that's what he was trying to deal with.
Scott Grayson was in New Orleans yesterday. You could check out Grayson's grades and the locker room reaction. He's got locker room reaction from Zach Ertz, Brandon Graham, Malcolm Jenkins, and others, Lane Johnson, on our website, 973ESPN.com. There's a lot of decisions. What, other than the Foles decision, which decision are you most interested in this offseason? Because I think this organization, on whether they're going to be a playoff team next year or a Super Bowl contender, I think a lot of that falls. This is an important offseason now for Howie Roseman.
Oh, it's extremely important to see what they can do.
Scott, you don't see teams stick around in the Super Bowl contender spot for 3-4 years. I mean, Denver won a Super Bowl a couple of years ago. They haven't been relevant since. You've seen Carolina get to the Super Bowl. They haven't got back. Atlanta was in the Super Bowl. 2 years later, they're out of the playoffs. So it's just not a rite of passage that you're going to stick around here for a while. These off seasons are huge.
Right, and I think that's why the quarterback decision first and foremost is going to be the thing that trickles everything down, because you're deciding on your franchise quarterback, and then also they're going to have to pay, if they keep Carson, they're going to have to pay him here in the very near future. So you got to structure your salary cap down the road as to how you're handling all that money that you've now got to divide out, and that's something they've got to manage as well. But you asked about the position. I'm really interested to see what this team does at running back. What are they going to do there to complement Nick Foles, because they got hurt this year by the injuries there. And I think the failure to try to do too much more or to even make a move like they did last year by getting Ajayi, that might have hurt. I mean, they did not have much of a running game here down the stretch. They had enough that they could have done something with it, but I think it would be interesting to see what they do with that. And also, Doug Peterson, I think, has to do a little self-reflection. And I just don't understand why they snapped that ball at 2:01. What's the hurry to try to score a touchdown there, because you're going to give the ball back to Drew Brees with too much time on the clock, and the penalty that he did not accept and allowed the Saints to have the opportunity to go for that that fake punt. I think that was another moment in the game that Doug Peterson needs to do a little bit of self-reflection and think about what he could have called better in the game at those points.
I don't know, man. How many people on 4th down in your own end of the field accept that penalty to give you another shot with Drew Brees on the field? I can't fault him for that.
At the time, I get you, because I went back and forth in my own mind about it. But at the time, the Eagles' defense was really dictating how that game was going. And I like the Eagles' chances at 3rd and 11 than I do of giving Peyton, the chance to say, wow, this game's getting away from us. We got to make something happen for us here. And that fake punt was a brilliant call.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think I saw a lot of people saying why didn't they accept that penalty? But I don't know that I remember a coach ever accepting that penalty.
I hear you. I really do. I just think that I think Peyton sensed that game was getting away from them, and he had to do something.
Right. I think you can make the argument. Starting. I think you can make a better argument as to why they weren't more prepared for the fake punt.
Yeah, I could see that. I mean, the Saints, to their credit, lined up pretty quickly, and then, they ran it, and the Eagles recognized that it seemed a split second too late. And by the time they realized it, the Saints already had a push across the first down marker.
Yeah, go ahead.
But the one that really bugs me was I was sitting there. I was like, okay, let this run down to the 2 minute warning.
Yeah.
And I know Alshon Jeffrey, as Zach Ertz said, will catch that ball 999,999 times out of a million.
Right.
But I just don't understand what the hurry was. Take your time, get a good play call.
Yeah.
I agree with
the premise of why do I want to give them the ball back. I think what they were trying to do was catch the Saints off guard a little bit. Like they think we're going to call timeout, or we're just going to let it wind down. We'll try to catch them off guard. But the whole premise is, why do I want to give them the ball back with all that time?
Exactly. I felt like if they gave too much time to Drew Brees, they were going to lose on a field goal. I mean, Lutz is not going to miss in his own building twice.
Yeah. But what was the feeling in that building when Lutz missed? And not to mention when Kamara gets blown up 5 yards behind, because if they just run the ball and get back to the line of scrimmage, you're talking about a much different field goal.
Yeah, it was, I think the sense in the building, it just felt like the Saints fans were thinking, oh my God, don't give Nick Foles this chance. Because the miss gave the Eagles such great field position. They were already out near midfield. You just need Nick Foles to go 50 yards in over 2 minutes, and the Eagles potentially win the game.
I don't think there was a person watching.
Fans got really concerned.
Yeah, I don't think
there
was
the air get out of the building.
I don't think there was a person watching that felt when he missed that was like, Eagles are winning this game. There's no question. Nick Foles is bringing them down the field because, I mean, of the circumstances, the guy gets blown up 5 yards behind, and you're like, are you kidding me that pushes him just out of field goal range, and he misses it? You give me the ball there. It just felt like the divine intervention was about to happen again. Real quick, the Kelsey stuff. There was a lot of reports that, he's going to retire at the end of the year. Then people were saying that's false. He did speak about it afterwards. What did he have to say?
Yeah, he actually spoke pretty honestly, I thought, about it with the media. And you got to remember, this is moments after his season just ended, and he was asked about it, and he said, look, I'm going to do what I do after every year, and that is to reflect on the season that was, to talk to my family and friends who bear the brunt of this career in this choice I've made to play this sport, and come up with a decision at some point. The way I read between the lines of his comments, he is seriously considering it. Again, this is just my impression of reading between the lines. But, the competitor in these guys, and look at a Darren Sproles who was saying this was his last year, now is talking like maybe he wants to come back and play in this league another year. It's hard to say in those moments right after a run ends, what a guy's going to do. But I think Kelsey is going to seriously consider this. And this is a decision that's going to be something he sits and stews about for probably a few weeks.
All right, so that'll be another thing to keep an eye on this offseason. Brandon Brooks, Achilles surgery, out 6 to 8 months, so there's that problem there. What's going to happen with Jason Peters? Will Brandon Graham be back? There's a lot of interesting things for Howie Roseman to jump into now. The offseason for the Eagles is here. For all the coverage of the Eagles and Saints, Scott Grayson, 97.3 ESPN.com, and he will be live at Super Bowl 53 all week long for, I believe, the Chiefs and the Saints.
I agree.
All right, Scott. We'll talk to you soon, pal.
All right. Thanks, Mike.